Mr. Battle, followed by our Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Raul Zamora. And we are also joined by our Assistant Superintendent, Leticia Salinas. And we are also joined by one of our fiscal directors, Mr. Rais Abbasi. We have our Public Information Officer, Mr. Brian Kilgore. And we also have the Executive Assistant to the Superintendent to the Board of Education, Ms. Patty Sandoval. And you can see Luis Zamora on the screen. He's running our video works in the background. So I appreciate everybody from staff being here this evening. Again, welcome to our public. We're going to start by going through our presentation, which we've shared with the community previously, both at board meetings and in the last town hall. I'm going to pull up my screen and share that presentation with the audience. And we may spend a little bit less time on some of the slides than others as we move through this process. And Patty, can you confirm we're up on the screen with the presentation? Thank you. As we move through the presentation, we may spend some more or less time on some slides, and then at the end we'll open it up for some comment and questions from our audience. I want to remind the audience in advance that this is not a Board of Education meeting, so we don't have the same general structure for public comment, but depending on how much comment interest there is, we will ask everybody to be mindful of their time, and we'll reevaluate that as we get towards that portion of the meeting. As we begin tonight's meeting, we want to start with just a review of where we've been. And I'm not going to read all of these to the audience. They can see them on the screen, and they've been talked about throughout this year already, but these are prior reductions from 2019. And also from June of 2019. And those reductions were close to around $16 million of an estimate at the time. And further reductions were made by the district in June of 2020. And there's some things highlighted on the screen that were not realized because we were not in session this year. So not all of those savings or adjustments could be realized. And I won't spend a lot of time going into the need for further budget reductions in terms of the why, because we've held some community meetings already and talked about that. But ultimately, just to talk about the three headlines, we have inadequate state and federal funding. We have a significant pinch on districts throughout the state, including Fremont, related to the unfunded state pension liability. And specific to Fremont, we have declining enrollment, which leads to decreased revenue. And that is not always matched by fixed costs. So we have increasing costs at the same time. Oftentimes I'm asked by the community about our general obligation bond and why we would need to make budget reductions if we have a $650 million bond. And many community members may already know, but that money is legally restricted to facility improvements, and it's not to be used for general fund operating expenses. That is a promise that we make to the voters, and it's part of the laws and regulations around passing a general obligation bond. And we are incredibly grateful to our community for their support to ensure we're able to do some of the things we need to do for our students and our staff related to their facilities. In the same context, we have a parcel tax, Measure I, which was passed in 2010, and that's at an annual rate of $73 per parcel. Again, the district makes a promise to voters, and we need to hold to that promise. I will say, however, that it is important to note that when you pass a parcel tax, and as I'm sure everybody can understand, the promise that we make to voters back in 2010, the purchasing power of the parcel tax is much greater in 2011 than it is in 2021. So like everything else in the financial world, our purchasing power doesn't normally increase over time when it comes to a parcel tax. So the current status for our district is we are in a bit of a unique situation, and that situation is created by a few different things. The first is our fiscal condition identified at the beginning of the year in our first interim budget report, which if you're not familiar with school finances, our first interim budget report is the first official progress report of the year for our budget. Our second interim comes up in March. At the first interim, we identified the need to reduce $17.6 million from the 21-22 school year and just over 13 million from the out year. And based on those findings, the Alameda County Office of Education has informed Fremont Unified School District that we must provide a reduction list totaling $17.6 million. And that if we don't, we may have someone coming in from the county to take over the role of some fiscal matters within our district. And that's certainly something that we don't want. Not that we don't have affection for our colleagues at the county office, but we want to be in control of our own destiny locally. The other unique circumstance related to that condition is that shortly thereafter, we got the governor's budget proposal in January. And the governor's budget proposal outlines a 3.84% COLA, which is a significant increase above our projections. To give you some context, at our first interim, we, along with almost every district in the state, were projecting a 0% COLA for next year. So to have the governor produce a proposal of 3.84% is significantly better news than we anticipated. We also anticipate getting some increased one-time funding from the state and the federal government related to COVID-19 response and learning loss mitigation. When we talk about the COLA, this slide is a pretty good reference. It shows you here in the 2021 year, the statutory COLA was 2.31%. And as you can see below, we were actually funded at a 0% COLA last year. The statutory COLA for this year in the 21-22, so when I say this year, I mean our upcoming budget year, is 1.5%. But the funded COLA is going to be 3.84%. You can see there how we get to a pretty close approximation of the 2 years together. The 3.84% is applied to the local control funding formula. And that's what we want to see, because that means that the COLA is provided to our base level of funding, our per student ADA amount. And that's where we always want to see the increases applied, because that gives us the most broad context of increased funding. However, it's not applied in the same way to all categorical programs. For example, instead of the special education programs in the state receiving the same 3.84% COLA, those programs will only see a 1.5% COLA. And on the bottom, you see the additional federal funding and the state's estimated share of that. The governor has not announced yet specifically what that share will look like as it comes down to school districts, but we expect that information to be forthcoming. And this slide is a reference point for our community. It highlights an average, and I always want to clarify that when we talk about an average, some are going to be higher, some are going to be much lower. But when we look at the average, and this is data collected in 2018 and 19 for unified school districts, their ending fund balance was just over 17%. Our current ending fund balance is around 3%. So it highlights that we have some work to do to address our fiscal condition. And I'm confident that our trustees and our staff are going to be able to meet that challenge. And that's part of what we're going through now. And part of the reason we're also engaging our community in a broader conversation about their interests and priorities and feedback. Earlier, I talked about the kind of the dichotomy of the situation that we're facing between having to give the county office a reduction list at 17.6 million, but an improved picture from the governor's budget. And this slide helps represent that. This is our current fiscal picture as of a month or so ago with the governor's budget proposal built into the projections. And so you can see this red number here in the third column over of the projected budget 21-22. The red number 6.4 in parentheses. That highlights that instead of needing to reduce 17.6 million, we really project now that we'll need to reduce 6.4 million. And so that's quite a difference in reductions. And it really, really matters in terms of the depth of conversation and the scope of reductions that might be needed. Nonetheless, right now, our county is still requiring a $17.6 million list because the governor's budget proposal isn't final and it's only a projection. And the state doesn't adopt their budget until the end of June. We normally end up having to adopt under the Ed Code our budget for the school district before the state actually adopts theirs. You can see in the 22-23 year a 6.3 in red, and that highlights in the out year we would need to cut an additional 6.3. Remember, a few slides ago I referenced a $13 million reduction. So the combined reduction is much, much smaller, and that's the challenge that we currently face, is providing the county a list of 17.6 million worth of reductions, but understanding at the local level the amount of reductions that we need to implement will be much smaller than that. So some key points for our discussion tonight and discussions that we've had along the way. I've covered most of them already, but I want to highlight, excuse me, that none of the proposed areas are things that you're going to hear staff or others say, this is in the best interest of kids, this is in the best interest of staff, or the best interest of the community. As you saw in the beginning of the presentation, Fremont Unified has been through multiple years of budget reductions. And when you get to year 3 of budget reductions, there's not much left to reduce. And it starts to really impact people, impact programs. And we are a people business, and we serve our students through programs and people. So the net effect of these reductions aren't going to be ones that anybody would articulate lightly as these are good things for kids. Most of the things that are being proposed are not things that anybody's really desiring to cut. I recognize there's many different opinions on the list, but in a broad stroke, what I'm implying is that these aren't things that we take lightly. They're very important, they're very serious, and we understand the magnitude that they have on our community, our staff, our students, and our district. So we have had some collaborative discussions about this already. We held 5 different budget meetings earlier this year based on attendance area. And we also met with each of our employee groups this year regarding budget conversations, considerations, questions, concerns, and I really appreciate everybody's input throughout those meetings. In the next few slides, you're going to see things that represent a cost estimate of possible reductions. The mere fact that they're on the screen or in the presentation does not mean that they're automatically going to be reduced. These are here for a reference point cost analysis. So you can see on this screen, this is the fiscal and impact of increasing our elementary class size. And you see here that the savings associated with those are based on the fact that if we increase class size, we need less personnel to deliver instruction. And you can see based on the increase, the numbers in blue, where we would go, depending on how high we go in those classes, that directly correlates to the number of FTE that would not be needed and thus the amount that would be saved. In the same context, we have a similar formula for our secondary class sizes. We have a ratio for class sizes at the secondary level. Please remember that the ratio and the class size will be different because students are experiencing a 6-period day, but the teachers teach a 5-period day because they have a preparation period at the secondary level where they're prepping their lessons, working to communicate with families, and doing a myriad of other intense responsibilities that come along with a full-time teaching position. On the remaining slides, you'll see a number of different items and their costs associated. You'll see here furlough days and freezing step and column. To highlight these are all things that would need to be negotiated with our bargaining units. For Fremont Unified, that includes our CSEA bargaining unit, our SEIU bargaining unit, and our FUTA bargaining unit. We also have an employee group, FSMA, that's our managers, and they're not a formal collective bargaining group as a formal union. And so when we engage with them around labor discussions, it's referred to as meet and confer. You'll also see a budget transfer related to the public information officer and the support for Measure E projects and public interface and interaction around that. You'll also see an increase in meal prices by 50 cents, an increase in facility rentals. And you'll also see the school resource officer program, and you'll see $3 amount there listed. Those are listed to reflect the percentage of savings. This has been a very important topic to our community. And I just want to call out that for much of this year, the community has referenced an $835,000 amount. It's not that that amount was incorrect, but as we project forward to next year, the 21-22 year, if the program were implemented at the 100% level that it was previously, it would be an $885,000 cost. So you can see the costs associated with removing that program, or the expenditures related to that program if the program were to remain at no cost to the district. We have a College Connection program, and to transfer that to the LCAP as a reference point, LCAP is our local control accountability plan. And if we transfer the College Connection program to funding from the LCAP, that is something that could generate a savings for us in the general fund, which is what we're looking for, while also maintaining the program in its current existence. A redesign of some of our transportation, freezing our general fund for professional development, reducing our board budget, custodial reductions. The number associated with that is based on the FTE, the full-time equivalent. And synergistics program is something that we were looking at previously, and that is an energy savings program. That's something that we've presented to the board already and is not moving forward at this time. An adjustment in books and supplies, teachers on special assignment, and management stipends. Our managers receive stipends for mentoring, coaching, and a few other activities that they engage in above and beyond their normal scope of practice. And then you'll also see here that we have some vacant positions that we would be looking at potentially collapsing. And you can see where some of these have notes. For example, our assistive tech or speech and language positions. Those are positions that are very specialized, and it's oftentimes hard for a district to hire those positions. If we collapse those vacant positions, it doesn't mean that we eliminate the service or go without the program. Right now, those positions are being contracted out by an outside provider. And thus, if we were able to hire somebody in those specialized positions, we would then have our own employee delivering those services, and we could make a corresponding reduction in the outside contract costs for those programs. You'll also see there are a mixture of other vacant positions as presented on the slide, where we would be collapsing these. These are positions where there are not currently employees within those positions. Additionally, there is a cost analysis for a reduction in elementary prep. Again, highlighted that must be negotiated. And I want to just clarify for our audience, if they're not familiar with elementary preparation, the elementary prep program is a program where our elementary students are not with their classroom teacher for a certain amount of time each day. They may go to science, they may go to computers, or they may go to another course where they're taken by a different teacher into a different subject matter. And during that time, the classroom teacher is provided their preparation time similar to what I described at the secondary level. And also costed on the analysis here is a reduction in site and discretionary budgets, both at 5 and 10%, and a delay of opening the Bringhurst School. On this page, we also looked at a cost analysis for potential revenue enhancement, and these are related to real property sites, both the Marshall property listed in consideration for a lease or sale, and the horse property as well. To just give a quick refresher for our audience, in most years, if the district sells any surplus property or any property, those funds are restricted to facility enhancements only. And there is a provision in the Ed Code, which was passed last year in light of the economy and the pandemic, and offering flexibility to school districts, where if they did sell a property, that revenue for a temporary time could go into the general fund expenditure process. As a note, when a school district leases a property, that money has always been able to go into the general fund, and that still holds true now. Also, other future options for increased revenue. We do have a current parcel tax, but you can see on the screen what parcel taxes at different amounts might generate in terms of revenue. I know prior to my arrival, we were not able to pass a parcel tax, which could have generated a significant amount of revenue for Fremont Unified School District. And so this is here just as a reference point for discussion and consideration. And on this slide, I want to be very clear. This is a bit complicated and nuanced, but I think we'll be able to explain it quite well. This would be a savings that the district could reach. It would need to be negotiated with our employee groups, But the savings is related to where our employees are provided their benefits from. So as our audience, our staff, our community probably knows and understands, Fremont Unified School District employees purchase their benefits, and they do that through a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority. And currently, Fremont Unified School District does that under CalPERS. And under that JPA, employees can select programs like Kaiser, Anthem Blue Cross, or a few different programs, whether it's HMO or PPO. And one of the things that we are exploring is utilizing a different JPA and providing what we would hope to be an equitable level of benefits for our employees. And that is most certainly a really important topic right now, given the current pandemic. And it is always an important topic for employees as individuals and for their families. And so it's not something that we take lightly or that we think is an easy or simple conversation. However, we also currently provide retirees coverage under our CalPERS medical plans, and those are part of our employee contracts. And currently we have just over 1,200 employees who receive those retiree benefits. And we do pay an administrative fee associated with those. And that would be where we would get the biggest chunk of savings, is not having the administrative fee for the retiree benefits. So again, not any action to take away benefits for employees or take away the opportunity to have those benefits. It would be a change in the provider, which again, I don't want to make light of it. It's a very important conversation for so many reasons for our employees, and that's why it's subject to negotiations for our employee groups. So given the dichotomy of needing to identify 17.6 million and the reality that the reduction may need to be much smaller than that, we proposed a tiered approach to consider how we might make these reductions as a proposal to the county, and then what we might actually enact when it comes down to budget time for Fremont Unified School District. And the slide here, I apologize, I didn't mean to skip over that. As you know, this is part of what we're discussing at the board, and at our upcoming board meeting on the 24th, we'll have some modifications to these tiers based on prior discussions of the board. But as it stands now, we have a budget reduction for tier 1, and I've provided a strike through of the synergistics program because we've presented that and it hasn't really moved forward. And so we'll move that off of our list. And you can see on the tier 1, the first item I want to highlight is a decrease in designation. So we have a designation of funds in our budget set aside, and we would drop $2 million of that to the reserve. And dropping that to the reserve would help cushion our bottom line, and it would help our reserve projections. In addition, you can see the collapsing of vacant positions, and you can see a number of other things that have been listed on my prior sheet. That includes at the bottom, the Hopkins zero period, which I know has been a very important topic for our community, as well as a reduction of custodial positions and a number of other reductions that are presented before you on the screen. I'll give everybody a chance just a moment to review those before we move on to the next screen. In tier 2, I'm sorry, I did want to go back and just call out in tier 1, and not to make any, I don't want to skip over it because I know it would be significant and impactful, is an increase in TK and K classes by 2 students, which would increase the ratio from 24-1 to 26-1. And I apologize, I didn't want to skip over that and not give it its proper attention and consideration. For the tier 2, an increase in class size through 1st through 3rd grade, an increase in the secondary class size ratio by 0.5, and furlough days, and that's for all employees, and it must be negotiated. And I just want to call out, as I mentioned earlier, when we say must be negotiated, that's for FUTA, SEIU, and CSEA. For our FSMA employees, it would be what we call the meet and confer process, but the cost estimate is for furlough days for all Fremont Unified School District employees. And the reason it says budget cycle, in case you're wondering, is because in the situation where we may structure furlough days over a 3-year span, we're able to address those savings over the 3 years of the budget cycle. As you may know, we are mandated to adopt a 3-year budget. And so We would call that a savings that appears through the budget cycle. And in tier 3, a decrease of 5% in departmental site funding on their discretionary funds, the 25% reduction in elementary preparation, and the change to CalPERS, which I described earlier. Again, 2 of those would need to be negotiated. And that provides a general total. It would be decreased a little bit. If you see here on the screen, the tier 1 and the ongoing total would be decreased by 600,000, as was highlighted in the tier 1 where we removed the synergistics program. But the reason we present a list that's over $20 million is because we know that there's a lot of advocacy, give and take, and critical conversations that take place around budget reductions. And so we want to give some room for maneuverability. Also, you can see above the $20 million in ongoing, the one-time reductions of 2.8 million. And again, to highlight for our community, those include the $2 million set aside that's in our budget moving to the bottom line, and also the 800,000 for Bringhurst not opening next year. And that's why those would be one-time adjustments. And as we move into the question and answer portion, this would be a time where attendees can raise their hand, and we will invite attendees to provide public comment. To the extent that we can, we may answer questions. And I also just want to highlight that as our attendees begin raising their hands, this is an opportunity where when we can, we may provide an answer. If it's just feedback for us, please know that we're accepting that feedback, taking note of that feedback. And as we get going, we may ask people to adjust their time a little bit to allow everybody some participation. Thank you very much. And at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Patty Sandoval to moderate our raised hands and those who might want to contribute to the meeting from the audience.
Thank you. Okay, we can start off with Sanjay Muralitharan. Go ahead.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. As a student from Washington High School, I found it very disturbing that the school board specifically has seemed to be prioritizing the SRO program above a lot of others pressing programs, including the custodian positions that will be cut. And I find this deeply concerning for various reasons. First of all, the Congressional Research Service has found that there's little rigorous research showing a connection between the presence of police officers and changes in crime and student disciplinary rates. In addition, SROs have had a profoundly negative effect on Black and Latinx students in our district, as Black and Latinx students are arrested at 1,000% more than our enrollment percentage. The same goes for disabled students who are sent to law enforcement 400 times more than their enrollment percentage. And as someone who works with disabled students weekly, I can tell you with authority that these kids are not criminals, and they do not need a cop referring them to law enforcement for their breakouts. What they need is mental health assistance. But what I find the most concerning is how the district is prioritizing the illusion of safety over actual safety, when they're constantly doing their best to protect SROs and preserve the program. And however, they're willing to let go important custodian positions. Like I said in the board meeting last week, our school already faces immense hygiene problems with our current custodial staff regarding lack of toilet paper installed, lack of soap and soap dispensers, and just general unsanitary bathroom conditions. With coronavirus being a major threat in reopening schools, I believe that sanitation should be a top priority, and we need custodians more now than ever. However, what we do not need are SROs who rarely provide an illusion of safety and have little to no effect on school crime rates. As a student, I'm afraid of the threats of returning to school, and I hope that our district recognizes what really keeps us safe. We need our custodians, not SROs. And I do have one question, and I'm not exactly sure. I mean, this is obviously not at fault from the superintendents and assistant superintendents. This is more on the school board. But I'm curious to know, why has the SRO program been prioritized over cutting like class sizes and custodial positions and lunch affordability?
Well, first, let me thank you for the comment. And in regards to the question, I think it may be a question that is helpful to all of our audience members as well. And I want to clarify, there hasn't been any prioritization of yet. The the conceptual tiers that are laid out in front of you are an initial draft or an initial starting point. The board has had conversations in the last 2 meetings, February 10th and a special meeting on February 17th. However, the board has not taken any final actions on prioritizing or making final decisions on their reduction list. So while I certainly understand the concerns that you've raised, in fairness to the process, I want to say that there hasn't been any action by the board to prioritize one thing over the other. In terms of how the tiers were set up, those were crafted by staff and recommendations put forward. And again, it's not to say that something in one tier can't be moved around. If you were, many of you may have followed our trustees' conversations on the 10th and the 17th, and they talked about things they may not want on the list, they may want to take off the list, or they may want to move in different priorities. And ultimately, that'll be the bulk of the conversation, I imagine, in our Board of Education meeting tomorrow, where they take final action. So certainly a fair question, but I just want to highlight that there hasn't been any final determinations on priority one item over the other at this point.
Victoria Berbacura, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Patty. Victoria Barba-Carrera speaking on behalf of the Fremont Unified District Teachers Association. Good evening to the superintendent and staff and any trustees that may be listening as well. I actually wanted to thank, I believe, the superintendent and staff in conjunction with some of the trustees' comments that actually at tier 1, we are looking at a recommendation of eliminating the SRO program. And I think that's being put forward at tier 1. Just, I understood it the kind of opposite from what Sanjay was reading it as. And so hopefully the superintendent can clarify further that staff is actually prioritizing elimination of the items that are on tier 1 above eliminating things like raising class sizes that are on tier 2 or beyond. So hopefully there can be some clarification there, because I think Sanjay spoke to the opposite. And I want to thank the trustees, even who were passionate about the SRO program, in recognizing that those services in law enforcement and schools would still come after we do educational services. So it was good to see some of the trustees say that they understand that we are in a severe time of cuts and that everyone needed to give a bit on their priorities. So thank you for redoing that and being in line there. I did have a question as I heard the trustees say regarding the board cuts and management stipends. I recall specifically at least Trustee Campbell saying we all do our part. But I'm wondering if there was some other discussion on management stipends that didn't happen at the board, given that it notes here that there were comments, and so that was moved off of tier 1. Just wondering if I should just review the board meeting again and may have missed it, because that didn't seem to be in line with what the trustees were noting, since they themselves noted that kind of we're all taking those cuts. And then with respect to the PD freezing for professional development, obviously as educators, we're hugely in support of professional development, but we have been underspending on professional development. So I think the district, hopefully we can work together to see what we can do to address that and get educators meaningful professional development that they do step up to do. But the reduction or freezing of that amount does seem more in line with what we're actually spending when we look at the actuals. And Mr. Battle and Mr. Abbasi presented a bit on LCAC, even though it was, I think, maybe the wrong year. I think that the data conceptually was correct in showing that we are underspending in professional development, both out of the general fund and through LCAP funding. So hopefully we can work together to see what we can do more for our unduplicated students and spending more there, and still getting educators the professional development that they need, even if we do have to make that cut. Thank you so much for your work on this and for very clearly delineating the evolution of that through the adjustments to the slides. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Victoria. A couple responses there, and hopefully it'll help clarify any questions that the community may have as well. So what Victoria is referring to is on our board agenda for tomorrow night, we have an updated presentation, and it does modify some of the tiers that you saw tonight. And to give some clarity to that, the reason those are modified is because it is staff's best estimation based on conversations that have happened in the public part of the board meeting. And so that is not always a perfect science because the board has not taken formal action. And so our audience probably knows and understands that the decision isn't final until the board votes on it. So staff has reflected on their comments throughout the meetings and tried to adjust those based on the sense of the comments that we've gotten. So that's why those tiers are modified for the actual agenda item that's presented tomorrow night. And for audience members who may want to see that, they can access that very easily on our board docs website or our Fremont Unified School District website. It will take you to our board agenda where you can see that. In terms of the management stipends, Victoria, great question. There was not a separate conversation anywhere outside of the board meeting. The comments I was referring to were the comments that we received from the community on our Q&A document for the town hall. I appreciate everybody's input, and we received a broad range of responses advocating for things like 0 period. We got questions about salary ranges for employees. We got questions about specific programs. We received advocacy for custodians and a number of other things that have been discussed in recent meetings. And there were some questions about management stipends as well. So that's where the comments came from. And hopefully that helps clarify some of the questions.
Trinidad Hellman.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just have a quick note on the budget and SROs. So yeah, my name is Trinidad Hellman, and I'm a sophomore at Washington High School. I currently have the position that SROs would be a good place for budget cuts. I've kind of flipped on this issue multiple times, but now after looking at evidence, I just think, SROs are not where our limited budget should be placed. A Congressional Research Service report on the effectiveness of SROs concluded that there was little rigorous research showing the connection between the presence of police officers in schools and changes in crime or student discipline rates. Paying for an ineffective means of safety in a time where every cent counts for a Fremont Unified School District is obviously a poor choice to make. And in a study by Alert, out of 25 school shootings, none were stopped by an SRO. If parents truly wanted the best for students, they would argue for other options that have been proven to help students. For the same amount we're currently spending on SROs, we could hire dozens of mental health professionals. But even if we don't hire more mental health professionals, we still shouldn't be spending our limited funds on a program that's proven to be ineffective. I know that having police officers appeals to our emotional, appeals to our sense of emotion and the safety for students, but we're looking at it through a more statistical lens, through evidence that has been provided through the Congressional Research Service. It really doesn't make sense to be spending our money there. Well, it could be better used in other places. So thank you.
Pavni Jagpal.
Hello, good evening, everybody. As a student currently attending Washington High School, I feel that funding the SRO program's budget should not be the number one priority. SROs in general have no impact on students' well-being and often make things worse. According to the Congressional Research Service, they conclude that there was little research showing a connection between the presence of police officers in schools and changes in crime or student discipline rates. Funding a program that unfortunately disproportionately attacks Black and Latino students is a poor choice made on behalf of FUSD. Also, they are very ineffective in school shootings. According to an Alert study, out of 25 school shootings, none were stopped by an SRO. Finally, cutting custodians and increasing class sizes is horrible, especially when we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. Custodians are very, very important in maintaining our hygiene and keeping our campus clean. We need them if we're going to reopen schools soon. Overall, I feel that SROs are very unnecessary, and the money being put into the SRO program should go to other programs that will benefit students and their future, such as mental health programs. Thank you.
Nikhil Prasad.
All right, hi. Good evening. My name is Nikhil Prasad, and I'm a student at Washington High School. As a student, I would like to give you my perspective on the SROs and their impact within the school community. As a student, they have no impact, if not making a worse impact for the students with just their presence. In today's current environment, the SROs would only increase the distrust for government authority within a campus and will only increase tensions. On the other hand, I would like to offer a solution. The Fremont Police Department already receives $95 million from the city and an $800K investment that would be easily taken care of with the annual amount of money that the police department receives per year. Assuming that you don't buy that, statistics have shown that SROs have been useless in times of need. As Trinidad and Pavneet has said, from an alert study, it shows that 25 different school shootings had occurred and not a single SRO had prevented the shooting. That just shows how useless they are. We're cutting things like electives, increasing class sizes, cutting custodians, while we're wasting money on an issue that can be solved with the mere switch of who's funding the SRO program. Things like custodians in the pandemic. Right now, that is something that be very, very dire and something that is very needed for our district. And as well as this other things, electives are being cut. We can have different money that can be invested into mental health programs for kids. We can prevent school shootings and things that could a SRO in quote unquote is needed for can be prevented years and years before it could something tragic like a school shooting could happen. Majority of students and teachers who are actually on campus advocate for the removal of SROs, and you guys have decided to bring them back. I hope that you guys realize that SROs just do worse than good, and with budget cuts, SROs need to be on the top of our priority list. Thank you, and I hope that you took what I had to say in consideration.
Rehan
Thank you.
Saber.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I had kind of a few questions. I was doing a little bit of research into the wellness committee or the wellness program, and I saw that there were a lot of, I guess, a lot of documents, a lot of basically things that indicated that the wellness committee really prioritized people's health, their mental health, their nutrition, etc. But I felt that there was a lack of action there. There wasn't many programs that were available that actually showed that, like, hey, we really care about these things. And I'd like to offer just my perspective on this. So, for example, I am a former Fremont Unified School District student. I went on to graduate from Cornell University with a degree in biology. I do research at Mayo right now, and right now I'm back home. But my perspective on this is when I was growing up, I had, my parents were both working. I oftentimes had to rely on school lunches or just snacks from around town to get through the day. And for these reasons, in terms of nutrition, like I just was not getting what I needed. Even when I went to school, I did not know how to properly take care of myself. I didn't know how to cook for myself. And after I graduated, I basically went to the doctors and found out I was pretty severely malnourished just from years of, eating snacks, just drinking coffee, getting through the day. And I was wondering if, what I understand that there are budget cuts, but what are the enrichment programs available right now that show the community that, it's not just we can say we care about these things and we have a committee and we care about your wellness, but really like it shows that, hey guys, this is what we're doing. Is there any program, I guess, I know there are nutrition programs, but is there anything that really empowers students, empowers the youth to make good decisions with their diet and health?
Thanks for the question. I will defer to our Associate Superintendent, Mr. Battle, if there's anything that's happening specific to food services and any campaigns that they may be doing in regards to healthy eating choices. I will also invite our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Leticia Salinas, to share if there's anything that she may know about happening in some of the wellness centers at some of the sites or other things that might be happening across our campuses.
Well, in terms of food services during the school year, we generally have different options, such as vegetarian. We have many students who prefer a vegetarian option, and that was something that we added as an option to the menu last year. So, and there's other healthy choices, which I probably can't name because I don't know the menus from that level of detail. But I do know that we do have good options for students that would like a more vegetarian oriented meal. I'll pass it on to Miss Letitia.
Yes, thank you. So we definitely have partnerships, particularly with the city of Fremont around wellness, and we have students that are wellness leaders and help to promote that across the city of Fremont. In addition, our high schools and our secondary schools participate with the Alameda County Office of Education around anti-tobacco use. We call it TUPE, and ensuring that our students are living the healthiest life possible. That certainly is an extension of our health classes and the support that we give students. In terms of extracurricular, this is an odd year, but I will say this, that traditionally our schools do offer a lot of extracurricular activities for our students to promoting wellness and healthy living. We certainly can continue to build on that and grow from it, but we certainly have a lot of really good partnerships with the County Office of Education and with the city of Fremont.
Okay, are we going to Marie Hughes?
Thank you, Patty. I'm also confused as to why custodians are on the cut list in a pandemic. And a number of people brought that up, but we haven't heard an answer yet. So I'm hoping I'll hear one tonight. I also want to mention that while it's true that the board has not finalized the tiers based on the comments at the special meeting, quite a number of them seem to think that SROs are more important than custodians and mental health resources and teachers. Therefore, I think if you're going to end up keeping them, you also need to add to the budget the cost of the inevitable OCR complaint that you're going to get. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. In terms of the question about custodians, I apologize if you feel like that hasn't been answered. Ultimately, I think we've shared publicly a couple times that the recommendation is there based on an analysis that we think we can maintain the recommended level of custodial staffing under the CASBO regulations with those modifications. It is not to say that we think less custodians are always the best answer. We recognize that it's a critically important part of what they do, and we certainly understand the community concern around why those would be on the list. So I'm not going to offer an answer that unequivocally defends that as the right decision, because as I shared earlier, there's a number of things on here, whether it's class size increases, custodians, making other reductions to programs that service students directly, that I don't think are inevitably the right intended outcome for everybody. But in terms of the number of custodians, that's why the staff has identified that number. As you probably recall, at the end of last year, there was a much larger number of custodians that were reduced, and a large number of those were brought back. So I'm not going to defend that 4.25 is a small amount that we can just blink our eye at, but we do think it keeps us in line with the industry standards for custodians based on the number of classrooms that we would have operating and the square footage. But we certainly appreciate the feedback on that regard.
Stephanie Zhou?
Hi, hi everybody. This is my first time speak at the committee, and I would like to bring up a few comments when I was in the meeting. Just hearing the meeting from the past, like probably an hour. I am a mother of 3 kids for the district, and I have a 4th grader, I have a 2nd grader, and one of my kids is actually going to the immersion program. So the impact of cutting the Hopkins zero period plays a direct impact on our kids, especially they don't have the time to take the elective because they use the elective time to study the immersion program. And the zero period actually help them thrive and actually give them more options. They willing to work hard. They willing to sacrifice their sleep time and go to take that zero period. I really hope that you won't put that in the budget. Help them, to be more successful later on. And I think cutting the custodian services, which sounds a pretty good idea, because I think the school, especially bathroom or whatsoever, should be a responsibility for whoever is using the school, including the student and the teacher. So cutting that service, I think it should, as a parent, I can see that put some responsibility to the student, help them, take turn to help to clean the bathroom, change the toilet paper may not be a bad deal. And actually it will eliminate the workload for the custodian also. And I think after hearing an hour, I also have another question. Why do we have decline enrollment throughout the district? Is that because parents are losing faith in the public school system? Is that the reason why? Because after I hear like there was maybe 4 or 5 Washington High School students, they're all saying the same thing. They are opposing the SRO program, but then pretty much they're using the same reason. So after hearing that for such a long time, I was like, if everybody is saying the same reason, if that come up to be a term paper or whatsoever, it should grade it as plagiarism, isn't it? So I think for us as a parent, we really have to pay attention. Is the standard of the Fremont School District, is that declining? Is that something that we have to address on? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the feedback. And I would say that the reason that Fremont Unified is in declining enrollment is an incredibly complex conversation. Not that it can't be summarized in some general points. Is it possible that some students have left the district because they were unsatisfied with Fremont Unified? That is possible, but I would say that that's likely not the main cause of our declining enrollment. Declining enrollment is generally matched to the birth rates, and those are declining at a corresponding level. And we also have to take a look at how many individuals are moving out of the community. Fremont is generally a place that is expensive to live. And so there's a number of factors throughout the Bay Area that impact what would cause a school district to be in declining enrollment. So it's hard to narrow it down to just one single thing, but I certainly appreciate the comment and the question.
Rehan Saber?
Hi, sorry, I'm back. I just had a further question. So I actually recently started a community enrichment program where I hold kind of interactive online cooking classes. And when I reached out to the wellness committee about this, I just really didn't hear back anything. And I particularly was very disappointed because, again, through my own problems, just like growing up in Fremont, like it is an expensive place to live. A lot of us have parents that they both have to work. And I remember as a, when I was like in school, we would go to the Fremont Hub and we'd all just eat junk food there because that's all that we had to eat. And I was just wondering, like, how can how can we potentially start a program like this in the Fremont School District so we can educate children about nutrition and diet and actually give them the skills to develop what they learned, or utilize what they've learned.
Thank you for the additional comment and question. As our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Leticia Salinas, is present tonight, I'm sure she will take your name and feedback and make sure that we're getting a connection to the Wellness Committee where those conversations can be explored further. So thank you for being here tonight and sharing that suggestion so that we can make some connections with our wellness committee to you.
Sanjay Muralitharan.
Yeah, so sorry for jumping back in, but yeah, I just wanted to say that I find it deeply concerning that a parent thinks that the practical way to deal with the hygiene issues that we face in our schools is to make students clean them, because the hygiene issues range from like the urinals themselves being broken and being decommissioned for for like a solid like month or so, or even longer than that. They also include just clogged toilets and whatnot. And that's just something that I don't think that we have the resources to face. And I also find it concerning that there are people out there who are willing to just ignore general data provided by the Congressional Research Service, which is probably one of the most reputable sources that we have to uphold a program that is clearly not effective. So I would strongly, and as the staff have already said, I would also, I wanted to express my gratitude that the SRO program is on the list of budget cuts. So just thank you for that.
Eric Thomas.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to offer a balancing comment about the SRO issue. It's a false choice between hiring thousands of mental health professionals, quote unquote, and having a security presence at the school. And the notion that police forces are somehow disproportionately being used against minority people and so forth is not really applicable to the safety and security of the school. So I commend you for, commend the board at least for maintaining the program, because I think some version of that is going to be necessary. And it's not just a choice between that and spending tons of money on mental health people. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And as we approach 8:30, I just want to call out, we have one more hand up. That'll probably be our last hand. So we appreciate our audience participation this evening.
Ganesh Belamitran.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks to everybody here. Clearly, this is a very difficult time, and I thank all of you for all the work that you're trying to do here to deal with the budget issues. It's unfortunate that we do have to deal with this and make tough choices. And I'm really thankful as a parent of Irvington High School freshman student, that we do have the SROs on the list of budget cuts. And I sincerely hope the board takes that into account, because I do believe, based on all the work and all the reading and everything that we see around in society today, that having police on campus at school is not an effective way to discipline our students, to deal with issues at school, or even to counsel students, as the Irvington High School SRO clearly claims that he is a counselor, which was very concerning to me in the police video that was put out. So certainly something that I think we should take into account, and I'm really glad that that is being considered as something to cut, because I don't think it's actually adding any value to the school other than a sense of security to some students and some parents, while it's the presence of an armed police officer on campus is quite problematic to a limited set of students. So we really should be looking at that holistically. And thank you for doing that. And I do hope the district comes out of this whole situation stronger under your leadership, Superintendent Kamek. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to just say one more time, I really want to honor the staff's time. So we've had two more hands pop up. I'm going to get those two hands in now. I'm going to ask that you keep your comments short. We were trying to end at 8:30. We do want to hear from our community, but other participants, if you do want to contribute something, please feel free to email me directly. I do review all of my emails. So Patty, if you could call the next two, the last one would be Joylani.
Sure. Aditya Arul Murugan Alwar. Go ahead. Aditya? You'll have to unmute yourself. Okay. Joylani Shabata.
Hello. I want to say thank you just for your time in putting this together. I know that, budget cuts aren't anyone's first choice. So I appreciate the thought that you've put into it. I'm a parent of a second grader at Glenmore. And I do want to say that one of my biggest fears with school is a school shooting. I'm also opposed to having an SRO on campus. And I do appreciate the Washington High School students who prepared comments for tonight and spoke up and represented their school as well as the other students and families in the district. And yeah, I'm hopeful that regardless of budget cuts, that the school will be able to find another solution to maintaining safety for our students on campus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our audience members who were present tonight, staff, students, parents, guardians, community members. We appreciate the fact that you took the time to spend your precious time with us to learn about our fiscal condition, to offer your feedback and input. It has been listened to, and we will certainly carry that forward. And again, I really appreciate your time. I want to thank our staff for their time this evening, and look forward to more healthy discussions on what are some very intense topics. And I appreciate and respect the varied opinions that exist on those things. So thank you for being a part of our process this evening. I wish you well. Have a safe and wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for joining us.